Greetings and welcome back to Room 303 and our chats with Emily, as we are calling our readings through the poetry of Emily Dickinson in the Johnson edition. We turn now to poem 246, Forever at His Side to Walk. Now, this is again back to the marriage imagery types of things that we've already seen in a number of earlier poems. Some have argued that standing behind this poem is Sam Boyle's. It may be the case. Again, so many of these poems, we just never know for sure. Our assumptions are that you've been following our stuff at learnstrong.net. Down that left-hand side, Chats with Emily, our playlist. I'm hopeful that you've already worked through our set of introductory comments. I'm hopeful that you've already worked through our preceding 245 poems. We just finished with 245, I Had a Jewel. And in that regards, this poem is almost like the mirror opposite of 245 as we'll get into it. Some of the background information here. It seems that Emily might be, in fact, taking issue with a famous passage on marriage in Mark 12:25, when Christ was asked about marriage, and he says it this way, quote, "For when they shall rise from the dead," that is to say those married, "they neither marry nor are given in marriage, but are as the angels which are in heaven." Now, it seems almost as if Emily will try to challenge this in some way. But I'm going to make the argument, as a number of scholars and readers of this poem have, that really what stands behind this is a reworking of the Genesis 3 and Milton Paradise Lost story. That is to say, the fall in Eden that led to, of course, the expulsion from Eden of the two first lovers, Adam and Eve. It reads like this: "Forever at his side to walk, the smaller of the two, brain of his brain, blood of his blood, two lives, one being now. Forever of his fate to taste, if grief the greatest part, if joy to put my peace away for that beloved heart. All life to know each other, whom we can never learn, and by a change called heaven, wrapped neighborhoods of men, just finding out what puzzled us without the lexicon." Now, the fact that this poem ends with lexicon, it seems to me, is of importance. In other words, there's only so much words can do, the lexicon, if you will. And Emily seems to be gesturing towards this notion that there is something greater than words, and she imagines it will be something that transcends even life and moves into afterlife. Notice the word forever being repeated, and then in the third instantiation, it's all life. At his side to walk, and then she'll comment on the smaller of the two. Well, obviously here, we've commented on this already in 77 different poems. Emily loves to emphasize her smallness, her littleness in comparison to him. There is a certain tone in this poem that makes certain readers wonder if she's being a little bit ironic versus serious. Notice she will say about these two lovers that they are brain of his brain, blood of his blood, two lives, one being now. Now, I think that a lot that's going on here, and a number of scholars have suggested as much, are playing around with Emily playing around with Milton and Paradise Lost. We've given full lectures on Paradise Lost at learnstrong.net if you'd like to run that to ground. But do you remember in book 4, as Eve is speaking with her Adam, in many ways to her Adam, and she says it this way: "What could I do but follow straight, invisibly thus led, till I espied thee, fair indeed and tall. Back I turned, thou, following, criest aloud, return, fair Eve. Whom fliest thou? Whom thou fliest, of him thou art, his flesh, his bone, to give thee being I lent, out of my side to thee, nearest my heart, substantial life, to have thee by my side, henceforth an individual solace dear, part of my soul I seek thee, and thee claim my other half." And then just to finish in book 10, you'll remember that the quote is, "Children thou shalt bring in sorrow forth to thy husband's will, thy shall submit, he over thee shall rule. Well, I think Emily is playing around with this notion, and I think her argument is that true love transcends the Adam and Eve type of story. In other words, Eden can be reclaimed. Now, follow how she plays this game. Brain of his brain, blood of his blood, two lives, one being, and then the use of the word now, emphasizing union, unity. And then again, forever of his fate to taste. Now, this is interesting. I mean, what is the opening lines of Paradise Lost, of man's first disobedience and the fruit of that forbidden tree, whose taste brought into, death into the world and all our woe? Of course, this idea of the fate as well is remarkable, the way that she's kind of playing around with the game where, no, I want that fate, I want that taste, I want to have the opportunity. Now, some have read this even in Christian types of referencing as the possibility of tasting in the Last Supper and all of that. Notice, if grief, I'm willing to take on the largest part. If joy, to put my peace away for that beloved heart. It's interesting that the spelling here of peace is not P-E-A-C-E. It reads rather nicely, doesn't it? And then now to the third stanza, from forever to all life, to know each other whom we can never learn. This is fascinating to me. In other words, true lovers are going to spend their whole lives trying to understand each other, but there's this recognition that it can never really happen until afterlife, when they will remain lovers, married or whatever, in an afterlife. And by a change called heaven. Again, the irony and the tone here is, you could make the argument this is a very iconoclastic kind of tone against certain kind of theological understandings. Notice, this change, they call it heaven. And then she'll call it the wrapped neighborhoods of men. In other words, after death, in the afterlife, we're all kind of in these neighborhoods. And then we go from we can never learn to just finding out what puzzled us. And as we said when we studied poem 48 and 224, Emily loves this idea of puzzling. She loves the idea of trying to figure out and understand things. You'll maybe remember that in a letter to Sue, letter 586, she said, in a life that stopped guessing, you and I should not feel at home. The idea that there's all these puzzles, these riddle poems. Remember 60, 72, and 173. These riddle poems. In other words, there's so much that puzzles us, and in the afterlife we'll be able to figure it out. Why? Because there'll be no more lexicon. Now, her use of this word lexicon is fascinating. She'll do it again in 728 and 1342, and when we get there, we'll remember that she used it here. In other words, words can only take us so far, and I think that's one of the major messages of this poem, is that true lovers, in some ways, they make their own, if you will, paradise to continue to grow on this notion of Milton. At 2b, I think there is a reason to ask, is this tone serious, or is it somehow ironic or playful? And in some ways, as we've said already, there does seem to be a bit of an attack on this notion of Adam and Eve getting cast out of the garden and all of that. As we've said already, there seems to be a suggestion that maybe her argument is, no, true love is we struggle all our lives to try and understand each other, but we'll never really figure it out until we can somehow transcend the lexicon. Of course, we can think about one of those most important texts, Bronte's Jane Eyre, think about Jane and Rochester. Think about Shakespeare's Sonnet 116, which I think stands behind some of this as well. You'll remember it. Love's not time's fool, though rosy lips and cheeks within his bending sickle's compass come. Love alters not with his brief hours and weeks, but bears it out even to the edge of doom. We've given full lectures on that sonnet at learnstrong.net. And then think about Donne's Valediction Forbidding Morning, where the same kind of game gets played. And then in the end, he says, makes my circle complete or just. Finally, at 3b, to own a little poem like this, do you believe in this kind of love? Have you ever experienced that, where there's a whole lot you'll never fully understand because words get in the way, but maybe you even hope that there is an afterlife so you can remain with this friend or person or lover to go on and continue to learn about them and through them? Thank you.